So this presentation we're going to look at core strength, but actually what your core is. So a lot of the time when we set out to lose weight, perhaps improve our shape in our own eyes, quite often what we're actually talking about is having a flatter abdomen. Many people set out to get the aesthetic six-pack as they think that looks really good and will help them to feel better. But what I want to show you today is there is much more to your core than that six-pack and just having a flat and toned abdomen. So first of all, what and where is your core? So quite often you will hear trainers saying things like brace your core. If you're a fan of Strictly Come Dancing, then a lot of the time the judges will say you need to hold your core and these sorts of things. But again, what does it actually mean? And quite often people don't really know. So you get all sorts of weird things happening, perhaps not as quite the same as in this picture, but some people blow out, pushing their belly out to create what they believe to be core strength. Other people suck their bellies in, whole variety of things. So again, hopefully what I'll show you in this short presentation is what we're talking about when we're referring to your core and also what we mean when we say brace your core. So first of all, where is it? So if you think of just an apple core, you've eaten it down to the centre. So if we put some landmarks on that, your head and your limbs, and what you can see is that your core is essentially everything between your neck and your legs. So let's look at that in a little bit more detail. So again, let's put some landmarks on. So if we pop the head on there, some obvious landmarks there and there. So hopefully you can get what they mean. So the first part that we're going to look at is your diaphragm. And this is actually a nice dome or parachute shaped piece of equipment, shall we say, that sits within and towards the bottom of your rib cage, moving up and down as you breathe. You will hear some people talk about diaphragmatic breathing. All breathing is diaphragmatic in that it moves your diaphragm, but you can bring more focus to get a greater range working through the diaphragm in some cases. We then have the abdominal muscles, so they're the second component of what I'm talking about here, though people often think abdominals and core are the same thing, but clearly they're not. We do have 4 layers, so the six-pack layer or rectus abdominis is the very top layer or layer closest to the surface. You have 2 layers of obliques below that, the internal and external obliques, and below that you have this massive corset type muscle that spans your body all the way around between the rib cage and the pelvis, and that's called your TVA or transverse abdominis. And that transverse abdominis works very closely with the next element, not the next element, but we'll come on to in a second, the pelvic floor. So spinal muscles are also a very key element of your core, and the positioning of them through your alignment affects your ability to stay strong and stable through your core as well. So then that layer that works very closely with the abdominals is your pelvic floor. Both men and women have them. It can be affected, I was going to say weakened, not necessarily weakened, but affected at different stages of our lives. We tend to associate it with having a baby or after having a baby, but other key times in our lives it can be affected are in the transition towards and through menopause, but also if we are super fit, training hard, maybe we wear tight clothes a lot of the time, or we wear high heels a lot of the time, we're constipated a lot of the time. All of these things affect our pelvic floor strength, health and stability as well. So the final element of your core we're going to look at is your glutes. So those buttock muscles literally form the bottom of your core, and having the ability to work through them and have them strong is essential really to having a good functioning core. So if we look at it slightly differently, you've obviously got a profile here. This is your abdomen down the front, and you can see the spine there coming all the way down to the tailbone. So through the bottom here, you can see the pelvic floor, sling of muscles that goes from the tailbone through to the front of the pelvis or the pubis symphysis at the front. Now, mirroring that up above is that parachute-shaped dome that is your diaphragm, and then we have all your abdominal muscles through here and the spinal muscles through the back. So at the moment they're static there, and a well-functioning core has to work as a cohesive unit. So it's not a matter of anything acting in isolation, but it all working together and complementing each other there as well. So as you breathe in, the diaphragm moves down. At the same time, the abdominal wall and the pelvic floor should relax. In order to breathe out, the diaphragm needs to move up to press the air out of the lungs. And as that goes up, the abdominal wall should tighten slightly and the pelvic floor should lift slightly as well. And the more we can have the spine aligned doing all of this, the more effective that is as well. So by getting it all working in this way, it avoids sudden increases of pressure, both in the abdominal cavity and down into that pelvic floor. Plus, through having that working as a team rather than just one aspect, it reduces stress and pressure on your lower back, but especially down into that pelvic floor as well. So a key thing to take home from this is, one, your core is not just the abdominal wall. So whilst a flat tummy may be your aesthetic goal, achieving it is not just about doing sit-ups. We've got to think about the other elements in this team, and essentially as well, got to make sure that we are breathing whilst we're exercising, because if this diaphragm isn't moving up and down, then you're building up a huge amount of pressure in here, putting outward pressure onto the abdominal wall and down into the pelvic floor. So that is going to compromise your efforts to flatten the abdominal wall, but also potentially going to introduce weakness into the pelvic floor. So I hope that helps you to understand exactly what your core is, what all of the elements are, how they need to work together, and why breathing is important during exercises rather than holding your breath as you concentrate on what you're doing or strain to do something perhaps. So keeping that all working as a team is vital for core health, strength and stability as well. So thanks to Burrell Education for letting me use the very clever moving model there, and thank you for putting up for my slightly nasal tone during this presentation. If you have got any questions or you're not sure on any element of it in terms of how I've presented it or how it relates to you, then please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thanks for watching and listening. Bye for now.